Richard Haass served in the administrations of 4 presidents. In 2003, he became president of the Nonpartisan Council on Foreign Relations. He has authored or edited 13 books on American foreign policy. His most recent is A World in Disarray, American Foreign Policy and the Crisis of the Old Order. The book is the focus of a new Vice documentary. It explores major foreign policy challenges facing the United States. The documentary debuts Friday on HBO. Richard Haass joins us now. Welcome.
Yes.
We'll talk.
Good morning.
It's good to have you here. We'll talk about the video, the documentary on HBO, as well as the book. But first, there is this meeting, second meeting. We're making. What should we say about it? How do we assess the fact that the president gets up and walks over and sits next to Vladimir Putin and has a conversation in a room that they've been having dinner?
In another context, it may be uncomfortable, but here, we don't understand why Mr. Trump has had this benign attitude towards Putin and Russia for the last several years. The fact that this meeting he went into without talking points, without his own interpreter, without a note taker, after not having an NSC official
Well,
also
you're
in
saying
the other
meeting. I mean, he just went over to talk to him. They talked for an hour, but
well, okay.
in full view of everybody.
I don't think we've ever talked for an hour. I mean, an hour is a long time. You can get a lot done in an hour. Yeah. And again, it's not taking place in a vacuum. We don't understand what has motivated this president, who hasn't staked out a lot of foreign policy.
What do you think?
The answer is then we're in the land of speculation about what be motivated. I don't want to go there. I don't know, but he hasn't explained it, and it's an anomaly. And we're uncomfortable because we don't know what his agenda is here. Right.
Mm-hmm. How is Russia affecting what you talk about in the terms of this world in disarray?
Russia's a real problem. In one way, it's a small country. We're talking about 140 million people, 1/10 the size of China. It has no real economy. It's just largely oil and gas. But Russia's become a spoiler. They've used force in Europe. They've reintroduced military force and geopolitics into Europe. They committed what's honestly atrocities in Syria. They interfered in our election and other elections using cyber. So Russia's become a real spoiler. They have defined themselves in some ways in opposition to the United States. One of the reasons this world is moving in the wrong direction is because of Mr. Putin's Russia.
Mm-hmm. And part of Putin's moves, you also describe, are fueled by a lack of American leadership.
Absolutely. The world didn't just turn out to be a fairly good place for the last 70 years. It was because the United States led these alliances, built these international institutions, was there. And without us, the world is not some self-organizing system. And Russia, China, but also other people like ISIS groups like that are filling the space because the United States is pulling back. And what's so odd, I can't think of another time in history when a great power voluntarily, in some ways, abdicated its position and created a geopolitical vacuum.
So having read your book and this documentary, you seem to be indicting Obama for that.
Exactly.
Well, I think it began under President Obama. President Obama, I think historians will define by as much what he didn't do. In some ways, George W. Bush overreached in the Middle East and Iraq. President Obama was in many ways then an overreaction and underreached in many parts of the world, taking U.S. forces out of Iraq, not getting involved in Syria. And Mr. Trump is his own strange amalgam. But he's not an isolationist. But he clearly doesn't believe in many of the institutions and many of the standing structures he inherited, from trade to alliances, and the rest of the world is beginning to learn how to live without us. Our friends are basically saying, hey, we've got to look out for ourselves. So history is gaining momentum in ways we never anticipated.
Is China filling the vacuum?
China can't fill the vacuum by itself because it just simply isn't that open. It's more worried about the perpetuation of the Communist Party and all that at home. But China, Charlie, is in part filling the vacuum, whether it's its new infrastructure initiatives, its new trade initiatives. China is filling in part the American space, but there's no one, not China, not Russia, not Europe, who can fill the shoes of the United States. The alternative to the kind of world we've had of a U.S.-led world will be a nobody-led world, and it'll be a messier world, what I would call a world of disarray.
Nail this down. If President Obama had been more aggressive towards Russia, Russia would now, and during his administration, have been less aggressive, is what you're saying.
I believe so. If we have, for example, provided Ukraine with defensive arms, which every person in his administration, as best I can tell, favored, but the president didn't, I think Mr. Putin would have seen less opportunity there. If the United States had been more active in Syria, I don't believe Mr. Putin would have been able to waltz in and get this extraordinary return on a limited investment.
Something President Obama did warn the president about was North Korea. Let me ask you about that, because in your book you talk about how sanctions at this point are not enough. What do you see, if anything, in this president's policy towards North Korea that gives you signs of hope?
Well, I think he's done one thing that's different, which is really put North Korea front and center. And Hillary Clinton might have done the same thing, to be honest, made this the #1 national security threat we face, put China on notice that we simply can't continue to allow this to drift. What I'd like to see him is try negotiations. I don't know if they'd succeed to put a ceiling on North Korea's missiles and nuclear weapons. If that doesn't work, though, we're going to face a really consequential choice. Either we're going to live with it, what they have, with their ability to threaten us, or we're going to have to use military force against them. Either one has tremendous consequences for the character of the world we live in.
You also write in the book that disarray at home is inextricably linked to disarray in the world. How so?
Well, in lots of ways. One is the example we set. Who would want to emulate American democracy the day after we have the healthcare debacle? We can't deal with our national debt. How can we pressure China on North Korea if China is one of the two largest holders of American debt? So what we're beginning to see is our inability to govern ourselves at home, to deal with everything from infrastructure to our debt to tax policy, is reducing the appeal of the American model. We have fewer resources available for national security, and we're more vulnerable. The only area I think we become less vulnerable, Norah, is in energy. Interestingly enough, that was something that happened because of local drillers. It didn't happen because of government. I think we've got to face the fact that our government isn't working.
Richard Haass, always good to have you here. The book's great, and the documentary is really interesting as well. Thank you so much.